Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are opening a truly unsettling investigative case file. It details the disappearance of 9-year-old Melodee Buzzard, who's been missing since October 9, 2025.
And this isn't just a search. You have to see this as more of a forensic exercise, really.
hmm
We're trying to reverse a complex, and I mean really calculated, operation of deception.
Exactly, and that complexity is why we're doing this deep dive. The source material we have, the official case synthesis from the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Office, it makes one thing very clear. This is not your typical missing child investigation. It deviates fundamentally. The file defines it by, and I'm quoting here, familial estrangement, sophisticated evasion tactics, and multi-jurisdictional complexity.
Right, and that's the mission for us, for you listening, and for the investigators. We had to deconstruct this frantic, high-velocity 72-hour trip across the country.
A trip that centers entirely on one person, Melodee's mother, Ashley Buzzard. She left Lompoc, California, drove something like 3,000 miles, crossed several states.
And then came home.
What?
Alone.
Came home alone, and the central conflict, the brick wall that investigators keep hitting, is her conduct ever since.
Absolutely. Ashley Buzzard returned on October 10th and has maintained what the file calls non-cooperation. Just total silence. She refuses to give any verifiable legal explanation for where Melodee is.
So today we are diving deep into the extraordinary, premeditated measures that were taken to hide a 9-year-old girl. These were measures sophisticated enough to just completely confound the immediate law enforcement response.
We have to unpack the timeline, the forensic anomalies, and the psychological profile of a case where the primary subject comes home and then actively works to erase her own child's trail.
Let's start with the victim herself and the isolation she was in.
To really grasp Melodee Buzzard's vulnerability, you have to look at her social context, or maybe more accurately, the deliberate lack of one. Her disappearance wasn't immediately flagged by, a big community network of family and friends because her social footprint had been intentionally minimized over years. That isolation, it was a purposeful construct. It really set the stage for this crime.
And the source material, it seems to pinpoint a specific catalyst for all this isolation. The death of Melodee's father, Rubiel Pinoy Mesa, way back in 2016.
Yeah, she was just an infant when he was killed in a motorcycle accident. And that tragedy, instead of bringing the families together, it seems like it was the starting gun for this systematic estrangement campaign.
The paternal family, we're talking about the grandmother, Lily Dennis, and the aunt, Vicky Shade, they've gone on record. They describe this long, systematic alienation.
The records show Ashley Buzzard actively thwarted, all attempts at custody or even just simple visitation rights. For years and years, they publicly said they were worried Ashley was mentally unstable.
And she used mobility to do it right, moving away, cutting contact, severing those critical bonds.
Exactly. And that history is so crucial because it explains why the system didn't catch this sooner. Melodee had no safety net. None of the common ones, anyway.
No weekend visits with grandparents, no aunts or uncles who'd notice if she missed a birthday party. Her whole social world was, for the most part, just her mother.
And this systemic reduction of her contacts, it aligns so powerfully with this idea of a mother who's driven by a protective or, a custodial delusion.
What does that mean exactly, a custodial delusion?
In that kind of profile, the parent genuinely believes they're rescuing the child. They think they're saving them from the other family or from the state or some perceived danger out in the world.
So for Ashley, isolating Melodee from her dad's family wasn't just avoidance?
No, it was a preemptive strike. In her mind, it probably justified the extraordinary measures she took later.
And this isolation played directly into the delayed discovery. It's chilling. Melodee was last seen for sure on October 9th. Ashley comes back alone on the 10th, but law enforcement doesn't even get involved until October 14th.
Yep.
4 full days later.
So the question is, who finally noticed? Who broke through that wall of silence?
It was an unnamed school administrator.
A school administrator. We know from the file that Melodee had been homeschooled for a big part of her life. And the source material notes, pretty chillingly, that while homeschooling is perfectly legitimate, it can also, it can inadvertently act as a veil for intense isolation.
It removes the usual checks and balances a school provides. Teachers, nurses, other parents.
All of it. The fact that an administrator was the only link suggests she'd recently been enrolled in some kind of formal program, maybe a hybrid public school thing, something that required check-ins and attendance reports.
And the bureaucratic diligence of that one person became her only lifeline.
You have to thank that administrator, whoever they are. If Melodee had stayed completely unregistered, who knows how long it would have been. Weeks. Months.
It's terrifying to think about. Okay, so moving from that structural isolation to the immediate physical deception. The details about Melodee's appearance, they're essential.
She's 9 years old, small for her age, about 4'6", 60 pounds, naturally has curly brown hair.
But that is not what we see in the surveillance footage from October 7th, the day they rent the car and start this whole journey. The image is radically different.
And this is the detail that just screams premeditation.
Tell us what you mean.
The footage shows the child wearing a dark, straight wig. It completely alters her appearance from her public photos. On top of that, she's wearing a hooded sweatshirt pulled up to obscure her face even more.
This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing.
Not at all. This level of physical disguise is a profound indicator of intent. It serves two devastating functions. First, practically, it sabotages the public response.
The Amber Alert.
Exactly. Amber Alerts, missing person flyers, they rely on accurate, memorable descriptions. And if the public is looking for a little girl with curly brown hair, but the child they saw at a gas station had dark, straight hair.
They dismiss the sighting. They think it's irrelevant. It compromises the whole search effort from minute one.
Right. And then there's the second function, the psychological impact, which is, honestly, it's even more disturbing.
What's that?
It's about conditioning the victim. Think about it. A trusted parent forces a child into a disguise, tells her over and over that they're hiding. That child is psychologically trained to believe she's in danger.
So she stays silent.
She stays silent. A 9-year-old who sees a cashier or even a police officer would just assume they're playing a role in this game. She'd stay quiet. It ensures her cooperation in her own disappearance.
So the premise of evasion was established before they even drove the first mile.
It was premeditated deception, applied directly to the child herself.
The planning involved here. It suggests Ashley Buzzard was operating with a really high level of calculated intent. Let's dig into the suspect profile. She's 40, the custodial parent, and defined by two key things: significant financial distress and what the sources call sophisticated deceptiveness.
Yeah, the financial instability seems to be the major stressor here, the thing that may have kicked this whole thing off. And we're not just talking about a few late bills. Court records show a documented history of debt collection cases. There's one from Capital One filed just 5 months before, in May 2025.
So a long-term pattern of financial problems.
A long-term erosion, yeah. And critically, the sources note a pattern of evasion related to those debts. Process servers consistently reported having a hard time locating her to deliver the paperwork.
So she was already practicing avoidance, already operating in the shadows of the civil court system.
That existing pattern is the foundation for the sophistication we see on this road trip.
Right.
The idea of disappearing, of becoming legally unreachable, that was already ingrained behavior for her.
And her activity at her home in Lompoc right before she left, it backs that up. This wasn't some impulsive trip.
No. Neighbors saw her packing boxes. They saw deliveries of moving supplies. This is not someone preparing for a weekend getaway.
The investigative report suggests this looks more like preparation for a permanent move or even a complete dissolution of the household.
Exactly. If you're planning to never return to that life, the trip takes on a very different and much darker urgency.
And that preparation leads us right to the two big acts of what the file calls operational security, or OS.
Right, the premeditation. We've already talked about the wigs, that first layer of OS.
And we know she put a wig on Melodee, but the file also says Ashley herself is known to wear wigs. This isn't just about fashion, is it?
No, it suggests a familiarity with changing her appearance to avoid being recognized. Using them for both herself and Melodee confirms that concealment was the explicit goal of the transport phase. They were trying to become two unrecognizable figures blending into the background of every gas station camera.
But the truly technical, the breathtaking piece of evidence, the one that really elevates this case, is the license plate manipulation.
This is the real aha moment for investigators.
Let's break this down. She rents a white 2024 Chevy Malibu. It leaves Lompoc with a California plate. 9MNG 101.
Within 24 hours, that plate is gone, replaced by a New York plate, HCG 9677.
is that so effective? What does that do?
It's a textbook way to defeat digital tracking. You have to understand that law enforcement and even, traffic systems across the country rely on automatic license plate recognition cameras, ALPR. They're on street corners, bridges, police cars.
And they're constantly scanning plates and cross-referencing databases.
Instantly. So when she rented that car, the California plate was immediately linked to the rental company. As soon as a missing person report was filed, that plate would go into a national database as a vehicle of interest. Any ALPR camera that pings it would trigger an immediate alert to local police.
But by swapping it to a random New York plate?
She buys herself a critical delay. First, okay, a New York plate in the middle of Nevada or Utah is a little weird, maybe suspicious to a sharp-eyed trooper, but it does not trigger an automated alert for a missing child from California.
And getting that New York plate, that takes serious forethought.
Absolutely. Did she steal it? Buy a fake one online? Was it an old one she'd kept? We don't know. But no matter how she got it, it required planning way outside the scope of an impulsive flight. It bought her priceless time, maybe a full 72 hours, which, in a case like this, that's everything.
I think we need to pause on that. If she is supposedly drowning in debt, as the records show, where does she get the resources or the knowledge to pull off something this sophisticated? Does this suggest she had help?
That is the multi-million-dollar question the FBI's Forensic Accounting Unit is trying to answer. The plate swap suggests one of two things. Either Ashley Buzzard is far more resourceful and, frankly, criminal-minded than her financial records would suggest, or she was guided and maybe even funded by a third party. If she just stole a random plate, that's opportunism. But if she manufactured or bought a specific valid-looking New York plate, that points toward a larger, more organized network, maybe one involved in something like a black market adoption.
And her actions when she gets back to Lompoc only solidify this profile of calculated hostility. She comes back alone, stays silent for 4 days, doesn't report Melodee missing.
And when the search finally starts, her hostility becomes active. The file says she was seen tearing down missing person posters from her own property.
That is not the behavior of a grieving, cooperative parent.
Not even close.
Yeah.
It's the behavior of a suspect who is actively interfering with a criminal investigation. It fits perfectly with the profile of someone who feels morally justified in what they've done, the delusional protector, and intends to erase all public trace of the victim's existence.
Her silence and that active suppression of the search, they're the biggest hurdles the sheriff's office is facing right now.
Okay, so now we have to piece together the actual journey. And the speed and the geographical path. They're really the best evidence we have for Ashley's intentions.
The trip covers about 3,000 miles in roughly 72 hours, from the afternoon of October 7th to the afternoon of October 10th.
That pace is it's punishing.
Yeah.
We're talking about an average speed, even with stops for gas, of over 40 miles an hour, nonstop, for 3 solid days.
It's physically impossible for one person to do that without extreme sleep deprivation or, maybe stimulants.
It speaks to an overwhelming sense of urgency. This was not a scenic drive. This was a race against a deadline for a transfer or a disposal event. I mean, think about the logistics. 3 days of near constant driving with a 9-year-old in the car. It's just an unsustainable pace.
So let's start the clock. October 7th, they leave Lompoc in the Malibu. Melodee is already in disguise.
The evasion corridor begins immediately. The car heads east through Nevada and Arizona. The key to this early phase is the license plate swap. It had to have happened somewhere in the remote desert, probably before they hit Utah, to maximize its effectiveness.
Then we get a digital ping confirming the car's location further east, Green River, Utah.
Right. And Green River is a predictable spot. It's right on Interstate 70, a natural waypoint for someone driving from California toward the Midwest, a classic gas-and-go stop.
But this is where the timeline takes a massive, massive turn, a deviation that investigators have called the Panguitch paradox.
This is the moment everything pivots. The investigation has hard forensic data placing the Malibu in Panguitch, Utah on October 9th. And crucially, this is the last confirmed sighting of Melodee herself on surveillance video. It's somewhere near the Utah-Colorado border region, which is right around this deviation.
Let's quantify this paradox for everyone listening. If Ashley's goal was the Nebraska area, the logical route from Green River is to keep heading east on I-70 towards Denver.
Right. Straight shot.
Panguitch is on US 89. That's about 2.5 hours, maybe 150 miles southwest of that route. She had to deliberately get off the main interstate and drive deep into rural, mountainous Utah.
That is not a minor detour for a bathroom break. The time and distance she spent driving away from the main highway into a more remote area. It demands an explanation. A detour that big implies a highly specific, predetermined destination.
So what could the Penguich anomaly mean? Why waste that valuable time and energy?
Well, the theories are tied to this detour. First, it could be a specific meeting point, the underground handoff. This detour might have taken her to a specific contact, maybe in a fringe community or an isolated house out in the rugged landscape near Bryce Canyon National Park, which is right there.
Or the second theory.
The second is that it was a disposal location. Scenario B Panguitch is the gateway to vast, rugged, sparsely populated national forest land and high desert.
The source material really focuses on the terrain there. This isn't just flat Nevada desert. This is the Intermountain West.
Yeah.
Deep canyons, high elevations, unforgiving wilderness.
Exactly. The terrain south of I-70 in Utah is ideal for hiding something permanently.
Yeah.
If this was a disposal mission, she would have needed a remote place where she could spend a few hours without being interrupted. The detour provides exactly that, miles and miles away from the traffic on the interstate.
It's almost as if that detour to Panguitch geographically grounds the entire disappearance no matter the outcome, alive and hidden or
deceased and disposed of. It's the most actionable piece of geography the investigation has. But it still leaves the question of the ultimate destination. Law enforcement says they believe the trip went all the way to the Nebraska area and then came back through Kansas.
the tight Nebraska-Kansas connection. And as we said, getting to Omaha from Lompoc is at least a 48-hour round trip of pure driving. To do that in 72 hours with the Panguitch detour and fuel stops, it means she had virtually zero sleep.
This extreme, almost manic pace, it tells you a lot about her psychological state. She's either under immense pressure from an external deadline, a buyer, a contact, or she's driven by an internal delusional panic.
But the key forensic problem is that the last confirmed video of Melodee is back in that Utah-Colorado border area.
There is no publicly released video that confirms Melodee was still in that car when it reached Nebraska.
Which strengthens a crucial investigative theory.
It does. That Melodee was handed off to a third party in Utah, maybe during that Panguitch detour, and Ashley continued driving alone towards Nebraska.
Why would she do that?
To confuse the digital trail, to create a false geographical alibi, or even to dispose of minor evidence in the Midwest, creating a massive search area hundreds of miles away from the actual handoff spot in Utah.
So the whole Nebraska leg could have just been a cover story, a diversion designed to throw law enforcement off the real target zone, Utah.
It's the most sophisticated part of her evasion. The plate swap beat the real-time tracking, and the Midwest loop was meant to beat the geographical focus. She then drives back west, through Primm, Nevada, and Rancho Cucamonga, back on the I-15 corridor, and gets home to Lompoc on October 10th.
Terrifyingly fast, efficient, and marked by deliberate digital manipulation.
So that 72-hour drive defined the search, but investigators didn't get any real leverage until about a month later. A completely unrelated legal drama temporarily put Ashley Buzzard back in custody. This was on November 6th.
Right. This involved that bizarre incident with a local paralegal, Tyler S. Brewer.
Brewer had been helping Ashley with something, presumably her legal and financial mess. He claimed that during a meeting at her home, he asked her directly where Melodee was.
And Ashley, according to Brewer, became extremely agitated.
She allegedly brandished a box cutter and blocked him from leaving the house. He said he feared for his safety.
And this interaction, which had nothing to do with the missing child case, led directly to Ashley's arrest the next day, November 7th, for felony false imprisonment.
And this was a strategic gift for law enforcement. While the charge itself wasn't related to Melodee, prosecutors immediately saw its tactical value.
It gave them a legal way to hold her.
Exactly. It provided a mechanism to keep her in custody, deny her freedom, put her under monitoring. It allowed them to apply intense pressure to try and breach that wall of silence about Melodee.
So this collateral arrest becomes their primary pressure tool. But the truly sensational thing that came out of this whole incident was the zoo couple narrative that Brewer told the police. He said Ashley gave him an explanation for where Melodee was.
And that explanation was, well, it was wildly unbelievable, but it was geographically specific.
What'd you say?
Ashley allegedly claimed she left Melodee with strangers that she met at a zoo in Utah. The reason she gave was that Melodee needed outpatient surgery and was being temporarily relocated for a month or two while Ashley sorted out her problems back home.
Let's analyze that. The story is flimsy, but it has one huge, crucial point in its favor.
Geographic consistency.
Right. It aligns perfectly with the forensic data. The mention of a Utah zoo anchors this supposed handoff to the exact state where the car was tracked on October 9th near Green River and Panguitch. Even if the meeting wasn't at an actual zoo, the fact she named Utah suggests the truth is localized there.
But the excuse itself, the outpatient surgery, is what investigators immediately flagged as a fabrication.
It's a textbook cover story.
It is. The source calls it a classic fabrication used by perpetrators in cases of filicide or concealment. You use it to shut down questions by invoking medical privacy and this comforting idea that the child is in care.
And no legitimate medical procedure, especially one that requires relocating for months, happens without a massive paper trail.
Of course not. So the plausibility of the reason is basically zero. But the plausibility of the core action, a secret handoff to someone in Utah, is very high.
So investigators pulled the kernel of truth from the lie.
Precisely. The disguise, the plate swap, it all supports the idea that she was meeting a prearranged party and wanted to hide her identity on the way there. This allowed investigators to formalize Scenario A, the underground handoff, and it made Utah the primary search area.
But all that hard-won leverage just vanished. 2 weeks later, November 20th, Judge Stephen Dunkel dismissed the false imprisonment charge.
A devastating blow to the investigation strategy. The defense team came up with a key piece of counter-evidence, an audio recording from Ashley's own phone of the encounter with Brewer.
And what did it show?
It directly contradicted Brewer's story. It showed that Ashley had, in fact, allowed him to leave, which completely undermined the claim that he was falsely imprisoned.
And the consequences of that dismissal were immediate.
And serious. The court ordered her GPS monitoring device to be removed. Investigators lost their pressure mechanism. She's now free to move, to leave the state, to potentially flee, limited only by covert surveillance, which is a huge resource drain for a local sheriff's office.
They lost their ability to control her movements and apply that constant psychological pressure. The whole thing just evaporated.
Yeah, it forced the investigation right back to square one, relying on old forensic data and public tips against the suspect who is determined to stay silent.
So with Ashley Buzzard released and maintaining that rigorous silence, investigators are forced to evaluate the known data, the financial problems, the disguise, the plate swap, the Panguitch detour against 3 distinct criminological scenarios.
And these scenarios are what guide the FBI's behavioral analysis unit. So let's start with Scenario A, which draws most heavily from that zoo couple story, the underground handoff, fueled by that delusional protector profile we talked about.
In this scenario, Ashley's motive isn't money or malice, but this perceived moral imperative. She really believes she is protecting Melodee from the paternal family or the state.
And she arranges a highly clandestine transfer to a third party. This could be someone in a fringe community, maybe a survivalist group, or just family friends operating under deep secrecy out in the remote parts of Utah or Arizona.
And the evidence for this is strong. The disguises, the plate swap designed to hide the meeting point, and the geographic consistency of the Panguitch detour and the Utah Zoo story.
Right. If this scenario is true, Melodee's alive but hidden, and finding her requires an informant or a mistake from that third party.
But the motive, pure protection, it kind of clashes with her financial distress, doesn't it?
It does. Which leads us to Scenario B, homicide and wilderness disposal. The grim possibility.
So in this scenario, the motive shifts. The financial stress pushes Ashley to a breaking point. Maybe there's an accident or an intentional filicide. And the whole 3,000-mile road trip was purely a mission to dispose of the remains somewhere they'd never be found.
And the supporting evidence for this scenario is, unfortunately, very compelling, precisely because of the geography. The rugged terrain around Panguitch and Bryce Canyon offers limitless, inaccessible places to hide remains.
And the surgery story becomes the classic filicidal cover story to explain why the child is gone. The high-speed driving is suddenly about escaping a crime scene, not getting to a meeting.
Exactly. And those packing boxes the neighbors saw. If you look at it through the lens of Scenario B, those supplies could have been used for disposing of remains or cleaning the vehicle to minimize forensic evidence.
It's why the searches in Utah have been so exhaustive. Even without a specific location, they have to assume the worst.
They do. And that finally brings us to Scenario C, human trafficking or black market adoption.
This one is tied directly to her dire financial situation.
It suggests the high-speed trip to Utah and the immediate return were dictated by a financial transaction. The meeting with strangers at a zoo could be a coded description of a prearranged, high-risk handoff for money.
And the disguise plays a critical role here, too.
A huge role. The elaborate effort to obscure Melodee's identity supports the idea that the buyer wanted a clean transfer. They wanted an obscured identity to minimize the risk of the child ever being traced back to them. It's about creating a new, untraceable identity for the child.
The immediate return trip supports that too. A transaction. Money changes hands, the product is delivered, and the provider gets out of the area as fast as possible.
That's what the forensic accounting unit is heavily focused on. Regardless of the scenario, the local sheriff's office realized quickly they needed federal resources.
The FBI's support is vital here.
It brings two major capabilities.
Yeah.
First, the Behavioral Analysis Unit, the BAU. They are crucial for profiling Ashley. They develop specific interrogation strategies designed to breach that wall of silence. They analyze everything to find the single psychological trigger that might get her to talk.
And second, there's forensic accounting, which ties right back to the money problems and scenario C. What are they looking for specifically?
They're meticulously tracing all the money related to the trip. The car rental, the gas purchases, any cash withdrawals or transfers that happened right before, during, or after that October 7th to 10th window.
So they're looking for a big influx of cash after the trip.
An influx of cash or a large expenditure during the trip that doesn't make sense for routine travel costs. They're looking for proof of a transaction.
But the current challenge remains her silence and that loss of leverage after the charge was dismissed. They're left with this massive search area in Utah and no real way to pressure the main suspect.
Their strategy now is twofold. Continued BAU analysis to be ready for the next chance to interview her, and maximizing public engagement. They are treating the public as essential sensors.
By releasing the wig photos, the license plate numbers, publicizing the key locations, Green River, Panguitch, Prim.
They're hoping to jar someone's memory. A motel clerk, a rest stop attendant, a tourist who saw that white Malibu, the weird license plate, and the woman with the disguised child. It's a patient, painstaking battle against her determined effort to hide what happened on that trip.
So this deep dive has shown us the anatomy of a truly complex disappearance. We have a child, isolated by her mother, disguised to compromise public alerts, and then taken on a 3,000-mile non-stop loop across the American West.
Melodee Buzzard vanished somewhere at the intersection of 5 states, all against this backdrop of sophisticated evasion, especially that ALPR defeating license plate swap.
The forensic data and that unverified zoo couple story have geographically anchored this entire investigation to Utah, specifically around Green River and that puzzling Panguitch detour.
Yeah, the entire case is defined by Ashley Buzzard's clear, premeditated intent to make the investigation impossible, to confuse the digital trail, and to change her own daughter's identity.
She planned extensively for the big deceptions, the wigs, the fake plates, the rapid travel. She was thinking 3 steps ahead of routine digital tracking. But the investigation now, it has to rely on the analog world. Human memory, physical evidence.
And this leaves us with a final provocative thought for you as this case remains stalled by the mother's silence. We've spent a lot of time talking about how sophisticated her plan was, the high-tech plate swap designed to beat the system.
Right.
But you have to consider the extreme pace of that 72-hour drive, the sleep deprivation she must have been under. What simple human error might Ashley Buzzard have made at that Panguitch detour that she thought was insignificant? Was it a scribbled note she dropped? A forgotten receipt from a diner? Or maybe a single casual, exhausted conversation with someone who didn't recognize the child's disguise? The answer to this whole complex mystery might not lie in the complicated digital trail at all, but in the single most overlooked human detail.